The great hall of Silverpine Castle fell silent as the heavy oak doors swung open. Torchlight flickered against stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Elena stood frozen, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird desperate for freedom. Behind her, she could feel the weight of her family's stares. Her father, Lord Matthias, stood rigid with shock. Her mother's hand had flown to her mouth. Her two brothers exchanged uncertain glances, their hands instinctively moving toward the swords at their hips, but none of them moved. None of them dared, because standing before them, filling the doorway with his presence, was King Darius, the savage Alpha King as the people called him, a man whose very name could silence a crowded room, a man whose reputation preceded him like thunder before a storm. He was exactly as the stories described. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders in waves. His armor was black as midnight, trimmed with silver that caught the firelight. Intricate designs of wolves were etched into the metal, their eyes seeming to glow in the dancing flames. A crimson cloak hung from his shoulders, deep red like spilled wine, like blood, but it was his eyes that held Elena captive. Dark and intense, they burned with an emotion she couldn't quite name. They locked onto hers with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight through to her very soul. "Do that one more time," he said, his voice low and dangerous, each word deliberate and weighted with meaning. Elena's mind raced, trying to understand. Do what one more time? She had done nothing. She had simply been standing here in her own family's hall when he arrived unannounced, when his guards had burst through the doors without warning, when he had strode in as though he owned not just this castle, but the very ground beneath it. Her father finally found his voice. "Your Majesty," he began, bowing stiffly, though his face remained pale. "We were not expecting your arrival. If you had sent word ahead, we would have prepared a proper reception." King Darius didn't look at him. His eyes remained fixed on Elena, studying her with an attention that made her skin prickle with awareness. "I don't need a reception," he said simply. "I came for what belongs to me. What belongs to him." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Her mother made a small strangled sound. Her eldest brother Thomas stepped forward slightly, his hand now fully gripping his sword hilt. "Your Majesty." Her father tried again, his voice strained. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding." "We have nothing that—" "Her," the king interrupted, raising one gloved hand and pointing directly at Elena. "She belongs to me." The words hung in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Belong to him? She had never even met this man. She had lived her entire life within these castle walls, the youngest daughter of a minor lord. Yes, she had heard the stories about King Darius. Everyone had. Tales of his strength in battle, his fierce protection of his kingdom, his cold calculating nature. Some called him savage because he showed no mercy to his enemies. Others called him that because he seemed to feel no warmth, no softness, no love. But she had never expected to be standing here in her own home, being claimed by him. "There must be some mistake," her mother whispered, though her voice trembled. "Our daughter is not betrothed to anyone. She is free to—" "She is mine," Darius repeated, and this time there was something almost possessive in his tone, something that sent a strange flutter through Elena's chest. Equal parts fear and something else she didn't want to examine. "I've waited long enough." Elena finally found her voice. "I don't understand," she said, surprised by how steady she sounded despite the turmoil inside her. "We've never met. How can I possibly belong to you?" For the first time, something shifted in the king's expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around his eyes. He took a step forward, and though her family tensed, Elena stood her ground. She had always been stubborn. Her father had often said it would get her in trouble one day. Perhaps that day had arrived. "You don't remember," Darius said quietly, and there was something almost sad in his voice. "But I do. I remember everything." He moved closer still until he stood just a few feet away. This close, Elena could see details she had missed before. A thin scar along his jaw. The way his hands, so capable of violence, trembled ever so slightly. The depth of emotion in those dark eyes that everyone claimed were cold and empty. 10 years ago, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, meant only for her ears. "I was hunting in the Blackwood Forest. I was young then, reckless. I chased a wounded stag too far, too deep. I didn't realize I had crossed into cursed territory until it was too late. Elena's breath hitched. She knew the Blackwood. Everyone did. It was forbidden, full of old magic and older dangers. I was attacked, Darius went on. Not by animals, but by something worse. Dark magic, twisted and hungry. I should have died there. I was dying there. But then, he paused, his eyes searching hers. Then a young girl appeared. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old. She had golden hair and eyes like summer sky. She wasn't afraid, even though she should have been. She knelt beside me and placed her hands over my wounds, and I felt warmth, light, healing. Elena's mind spun backward through time. 10 years ago, she had been 12, and there had been a day when she had disobeyed her father's strict orders and wandered into the Blackwood, drawn by something she couldn't explain. A pull, a need to be there, and she had found someone, a young man, barely more than a boy, bleeding and broken on the forest floor. You, she breathed, the memory flooding back like a dam breaking. That was you, Darius nodded slowly. You saved my life that day. And when you finished, when you had given so much of your own strength to heal me, you made me promise something. Do you remember? Elena's mind reached back, grasping at fragments of that day. She had been so young, so frightened, yet so determined. She remembered kneeling beside the stranger, her hands glowing with a light she didn't understand. A gift, her grandmother had called it. A dangerous secret she must never reveal, and she remembered making him promise. Don't tell anyone, she had whispered. Don't let them know what I did. Don't come looking for me. You made me promise not to come for you, Darius said, his voice rough with emotion. Not until you were ready. Not until you were old enough to choose your own path. And I kept that promise. For 10 years I kept it. Even though every day I thought of you. Every day I wanted to find you. To thank you. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. To be near you again. Elena's family had fallen completely silent behind her. They were listening to every word, trying to piece together this impossible tale. But today, Darius continued, his jaw tightening, today I learned that your father has been arranging a marriage for you, to Lord Blackwood's son, a cruel man, a dangerous man, and I could wait no longer. Her father made a sound of protest. The arrangement is not yet final. It will never be final, Darius said, his voice hardening as he finally looked away from Elena to face her father. Because she will not marry him. She will marry me, if she chooses to. Those last words hung in the air, unexpected and precious. If she chooses to. Elena stared at the savage Alpha King, this man who had kept a promise for 10 years. This man who had traveled here, stormed into her family's hall and claimed her in front of everyone, but still, he offered her a choice. You could have ordered it, she said quietly. You're the king. You could have simply demanded my hand. I could have, Darius agreed, but you gave me a gift once. You asked nothing in return. You simply healed me and sent me on my way. How could I repay that kindness with cruelty? How could I take your choice from you? He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer than she would have thought possible. I'm asking, Elena, not commanding. Will you come with me? Will you stand by my side? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you gave me that day? Elena looked at this man, this king, who had waited 10 years to keep a promise to a 12-year-old girl, who had stormed a castle but still offered her freedom, who was called savage by his enemies but showed her only gentleness. She thought of Lord Blackwood's son, who had cold eyes and cruel hands. She thought of the life her father had planned for her, safe and small and suffocating, and she thought of that day in the forest, when she had felt something stir in her chest as she healed the dying stranger, something that had never quite gone away, something that had waited, patient and quiet, for 10 long years. Do that one more time, she said softly, echoing his earlier words with a small smile playing at her lips. Ask me one more time. Understanding dawned in Darius's eyes, warm and bright as sunrise. He dropped to one knee before her, right there in the great hall in front of her speechless family and his own guards, the savage Alpha King kneeling. Elena, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen? Will you let me love you, as I have loved the memory of you for 10 years? She reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and steady. Yes, she said simply. Her family erupted into noise behind her. Her mother crying, her father protesting, her brothers demanding explanations. But Elena heard none of it. She was looking at Darius, at the joy and relief flooding his face, transforming him from something savage into something beautiful. He rose to his feet, pulling her close, and Elena realized that sometimes the most savage hearts beat with the gentlest love. Sometimes the longest waits lead to the sweetest endings, and sometimes a 12-year-old girl in a forbidden forest plants the seeds of a love that will grow into something extraordinary. "Thank you," Darius whispered against her hair. "For then, for now, for choosing me." Elena smiled, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. "Thank you for waiting," she whispered back. "And for keeping your promise." As they stood together in the flickering torchlight, while her family slowly came to terms with this sudden, strange and somehow perfect turn of events, Elena knew that her life had just changed forever. But she wasn't afraid. Because sometimes the most unexpected paths lead us exactly where we were always meant to be. And sometimes the Savage King is simply a man who loved a girl who saved him, and waited 10 years to tell her so.